All right, good morning, good evening, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of the regional workshop on good regulatory practices and medical device regulation. For those joining for the first time today, I am Mugand, the Southeast Asia lead for the COVID-19 Medical Device Regulatory Convergence Project, or the MDRC. The MDRC is a US government-funded public-private partnership between USAID, the American National Standards Institute, and the Advanced Medical Technology Association, or ADVAMED. This workshop today is very kindly supported by the ASEAN Medical Device Committee and the ASEAN Secretariat. So thank you. And thank you to all speakers, especially those joining from the US and Geneva today. A number of pre-event announcements. This workshop is being recorded and will be made available on the MDRC website. My colleagues will be dropping the link in the chat box. On the housekeeping front, please ensure you're muted unless you're presenting. And if you have questions or comments, please drop them into the Q&A section at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and the panelists will try to address them when they get the opportunity. Now, the previous day, we heard about GRPs and standards under the WTO-TBT agreement, including the benefits of regulatory cooperation and coherence tools, the rationale for recognition of foreign conformity assessment results, which are encouraged in the TBT agreement, and mutual recognition agreements, transparency obligations, notification process, and the e-ping platform. Renee Hancher from the USTR went a little bit more into principles such as transparency, predictability, inclusivity, consistency, and accountability, and highlighted specific GRPs like public consultation, internal coordination, and making sound decisions based on best available science and data. In the second panel on global frameworks for medical devices, we went through revisions to the WHO Global Model Regulatory Framework for medical devices, including IVDs, and key concepts for WHO Good Reliance, and the function of the IMDRF, or the International Medical Device Regulators Forum. Indonesia shared its national perspective on regulation of medical devices in line with international guidance and the AMDD. Tammy Stewart from Roche Diagnostics spoke about the need for convergence to expedite access to safe and effective products and improving health outcomes, and the challenges of having multiple jurisdiction-specific regulations. She also shared the concept of total product lifecycle convergence, from classification to expedited pathways for approval, alignment with IMDRF, leveraging global clinical data and use of RWE, and improving digitalization and e-labeling, as well as adopting a risk-based approach for product modifications. And aside from the theme of convergence and harmonization that recurred throughout the presentations and the Q&A, one other point that I noted was the need to consider the feasibility of implementing regulatory frameworks when developing them. So let's continue today's session with use and contextualization of reliance models to streamline medical device assessment, where we will look at individual country experience with reliance models, including the common dossier template. The panel is moderated by Siit-Wing Gang, Director of Regulatory Affairs at Cook Medical, with panelists Neil Mafnas from the US FDA Center for Devices and Radiological Health, Wang Wei Jiang, Assistant Group Director, Medical Devices Cluster, Singapore Health Sciences Authority, and Cecilia Matienzo, Director, Center for Device Regulation, Radiation Health and Research in the Philippines. Over to you, Winger.
Thank you, Mugan. Welcome, everyone. As we look at it, regulatory compliance is one of the challenges that we face, especially post-COVID. And today we would have a great session from our distinct panelists to be able to share with us how a reliance model can be used to help countries achieve regulatory compliance, right, in short view of challenges in resources and how we can share information across. I think let's start with our first speaker, Neil, from FDA, where he will be sharing with us on MDSAP, reliance applied to quality management system.
Wingang, how about we start with Wang Wei Cheong? I think we're still waiting for Neil to join.
Oh, yes, I see Neil have not come on. All right, Wei Jun, over to you to talk about CATT. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wingang. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Wei Jun, and as introduced, I'm the Assistant Group Director of Medical Device Cluster of Health Sciences Authority. So in Medical Device Cluster, we have 4 branches, namely the Therapeutic Device Branch, Diagnostic Device, Digital Health, and finally the Quality, Compliance, and Adverse Events Branch. I would like to also take this opportunity to thank the organizer for inviting me to present on the topic, use and contextualization of reliance models to streamline medical device assessment. Could you put the slides for me, please, Morgan?
Yes, sure. Give me a second. Can't seem to share my screen.
Okay, well, Mugan is putting on the slides. Maybe I'll just like to start off with, Mugan, you can straight away go to the second slide, which touches on the regulatory reliance. I would like to start with this regulatory reliance model from WHO. WHO defines regulatory reliance as the act whereby the regulatory authority in one jurisdiction may take into account and give significant weight, either totally or partially, to rely on for products of another regulatory authority or trusted institution in reaching its own decision. So there are several ways of reliance. First, I'll start off with a situation where there's no reliance, where NRA is a WHO term which stands for National Regulatory Agency, where NRA does its own review and inspection. And then you have the when the NRA does work sharing or have a bridge pathway, that's a way of one of the reliance model, and they can rely on evaluations by competent and trusted authorities. However, they do make the independent final decision making. And then going forward, you have the regional reliance model. When you can go on to the next slide. Yeah, you have the regional reliance model where in a region, maybe there's only one centralized evaluation, and a group of countries rely on the evaluation of this centralized evaluation. And finally, you have either the unilateral or mutual recognition, which usually is based on treaties or legislative provisions. So a few points to note: reliance is really relevant to all. It's not restricted to any different countries. So countries which have like-minded kind of regulatory framework could work on work sharing. That's a model of reliance, and decide on further. When with work sharing, you can still decide on the final decision on your own. To stress also that in reliance, the NRA maintain independence, sovereignty, and accountability in the decision. NRA also should be consistent and transparent about their reliance approaches and engage with all stakeholders to ensure awareness of the reliance models. And reliance models should also be supported by proper mandates and regulations. So if you go to the next slide, why reliance actually for any NRAs or any country? Firstly, reliance promotes regulatory efficiency. It leverages work done by another trusted agency. And this regulatory efficiency would then allow and lead to enhanced accessibility to safe, effective, and good quality medical device. It allows the relying regulatory agency to maintain and retain its jurisdictional independence. It relies on the assessment and decisions from others, retains sovereignty of decision making. So they make the decision themselves. So there should be some experts to make this decision. And again, it remains responsible and accountable for regulatory decisions taken. So to establish an effective reliance approach, the relying agency should build confidence in the evaluation and assessment conducted by the other trusted agency. And the trusted agency must also be transparent on the evaluation and assessment criteria and how they evaluate and make decisions on the regulatory approvals. To sustain any reliance approach, there needs to be ongoing engagement between the two parties to build continuous trust and confidence. Next slide, please. So I will be describing three models of reliance that HSA has experienced, and through it, hopefully you can see how different ways of reliance can be done. When HSA started our regulation, we adopted a reliance approach by leveraging the approvals granted by the we call the 5 reference agencies. And these 5 reference agencies are the founding members of GHTF, the Good Harmonization Task Force. This speeds up our evaluation and decisions for our local approvers. Why this GHTF? Of course, they are the trusted agencies that we recognize. And also, when we did our regulatory framework, we also based our framework very largely, including the definition and the risk classification, very largely on GHTF guidance documents. So there's synergy in it for us to rely on these 5 reference agencies, meaning I've put it here: Australia TGA, Health Canada, EU, Japan, MHRA, and US FDA. On top of that, in our reliance model, we also require that the product that are approved in this reference agency need to have safe marketing history in the respective reference agency. So this allows us to have shorter turnaround time, and that there's a lower cost in bringing the product in terms of the licensing cost into the market, and there's less dossier requirement, because for such reliance, then the companies can come in for a breach evaluation. The dossier requirements are a bit lesser than the full evaluation where there are no reference agencies. So we do a breach evaluation for this and make the final decision independently while we leverage the evaluation done by the 5 reference agencies. Next slide, please. And then I would like to move on to this recognition. As I mentioned earlier, Australia is a reference agency that's designated by HSA. Australia also recently recognized us as a comparable regulator, which means that they will leverage HSA's evaluation and approval to fast-track their regulatory decision making. And besides us, Australia also recognized Canada, EU, Japan, and US. So this recognition was true. Before this recognition, we actually had multiple discussions with Australia TGA. We've shared our evaluation reports with them. So there was trust and there was transparency in the process before Australia decides to recognize us as a comparable regulator. And on top of that, I understand that Australia also had to do a legislative amendment to list Singapore HSA as a comparable overseas regulator for medical devices. Next slide, please. So then I will move on to the ASEAN CSDT, or Common Submission Dossier Template. Why this is so, probably some of you, or if not all of you, know that ASEAN has adopted a Common Submission Dossier Template where this template for dossier submission is applicable for all 10 ASEAN countries. So that is a harmonized way of allowing submission of medical device applications. And in this, because of the ASEAN Medical Device Directive, we have actually harmonized the definitions, harmonized the risk class, and of course the submission dossier template. And this, in fact, actually allows us for this harmonization actually can allow us for a faster track in terms of reliance. And I would explain one of the reliance that we have done with Thai FDA. Next slide, please. Okay, in 2020 September, Singapore, HSA, and Thailand, Thai FDA launched the regulatory reliance pilot project. We went through a confidence building stage where several officers from Thai FDA came to Singapore, and we had a discussion, and also for Thai FDA to understand how we evaluate and assess and do our assessment for the medical devices. And we shared our evaluation criteria, processes, decision-making procedure. And of course, prior to this, we also had a confidentiality agreement signed between both parties to allow us to share freely the submission-related information. And on top of that, we require that the company give us consent to share information, because when it's required by our law that we cannot share confidential information unless it's being granted, approved by the relevant party. Next slide, please. So with this, we went through quite the pilot study. We went through quite a few evaluation reports where, with the cooperation of companies, the pilot project went through. We ironed out some issues that we may have, and we are happy to say that we announced about this reference agency for Thai FDA in October 2021. And with this reliance, it allows for expedited medical device registration program in Thailand with a shorter duration of registration. Of course, there are some criteria which I've stated here that they have to meet before they can come in with this Thai FDA reliance. Next slide, please. I'll not go through this in detail due to the time, but it's just some of the procedures that the company have to can go through and have to comply with. This is a consent form that I mentioned earlier, where the Singapore company that registered with HSA has to consent to us sharing the information, and other parts of the process that for the companies to follow. Next slide, please. So the learnings from it is that, of course, we do note that the resources that we have to put in to share our evaluation reports, and then we are mindful that there will be post-registration in the requirements, and that we may also need to share evaluation outcomes due to the post-registration updates. And then when there's new information, that we are mindful that has to be shared with the relying party as well. So ultimately, regulatory reliance is an important tool to maintain, to manage the strains on regulatory resources and improve patient access to medical devices. So as we progress, if you see the last one, as we progress, we started with C and D, and then we progressed to Class B. And with the added confidence, with quite a number of years of experience, we for some of the evaluation, instead of getting the evaluation report, in all our approved products are actually listed on our Singapore Medical Device Register, and Thai FDA do refer to there to know whether the product has been approved. So that's the end of my sharing about the three reliance model that HSA has experienced before, both as a reliant party and a receiving party. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, Wee-Jun.
Wing Gang, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you
I
for
was going to
sharing.
tell you you're muted. Sorry.
Yeah, I saw it. I started voice speaking there. I saw I was muted. Thank you. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Wee-Jun, for sharing. Yeah, I think it's great. Singapore has great experience since the start. I think that was the decision we made up front that we wouldn't have resources to do everything ourselves, which is good.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I think let's move on to Cecilia to share with us from Philippines on Philippines experience on the CSDT as a reliance mechanism, right? You do it. So Cecilia, over to
Hi,
you.
good morning, Mijang.
Morning.
Good morning, Cecil. Good to see you virtually.
Yeah, I'm still out of towns, but I think I need to join this session. I don't have any presentation prepared because we are just starting with all this reliance thing. No? For the Philippines, we already look into this one even during the time of us doing the ASEAN Medical Device Directive. It's always been a question to me by my bosses. What is the advantage of having this CSDT and doing all this harmonization? So I'm always telling them that this harmonization thing will ensure that the Philippines will have a timely access to different medical devices, considering that the Philippines is about 90% importing country as far as medical device is concerned. And what we are now doing now is since I'm sorry, I'm still sleepy. When we are starting to implement the implementation of the CSDT or the ASEAN Medical Device Directive in 2020. Of course, we cannot immediately implement the reliance or recognizing the different approval. So we need to launch first our new regulations. However, during this pandemic, we were able to see the importance of being reliant to other national regulatory agency. However, it is very, very important that we do understand the regulation of the countries wherein we will accept in total their certifications or their technical documentations, without us having redoing the evaluation. So as far as the CSDT is concerned, now we have implemented a breach approval, but only for those applications with certificate of product registration issued by the ASEAN member countries who have been able to evaluate or approve that is the really main purpose of this harmonization as far as the Philippines is concerned. That is what I am always telling our big bosses here, and because they are always telling us what's the use of all these harmonizations if we will be evaluating or redoing all these things again. So we started with the breach approval wherein we have already issued advisory in this, and we have already issued a policy on how to do this reliance thing, or this breach approval. So for us, the company should be able to submit or product that are approved by the member economies using the CSDT, and we do only consider all the technical requirements. So the process is, I think we have already revised our application form wherein they will indicate there if it is under a breach of approval, so that we could recognize that one. So that way we could have a faster lane for this thing. But that is not yet that established because everything is filed through email. We still don't have any face-to-face application or submission of all these applications. No. So what we are doing is we do only evaluate all the legal requirements submitted. No? So these legal requirements are those what are required by the Philippine government. And for the technical requirements, we just make sure that it is complete. They have submitted the complete technical requirements following our CSDP format. And that way we were able to shorten the approval process, no, for the issuance of the certificate of product registration. So this is just the start of our reliance activity. We are not closing doors in considering any other certificates coming from, for example, from the US or from EU. But as a start, we are just starting with all this approval from the ASEAN member countries. Okay, we are also planning, as far as IVD is concerned, we are planning to join the WHO collaboration on pre-qualified IVDs. We are just preparing some documentation so that we could already launch this collaboration with the WHO. We have some papers that are being discussed by our legal service before we sign the agreement with the WHO. So I think that is just for now. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, Cecilia, for sharing with us what Philippines have been doing. It's great to see Philippines moving ahead with that reliance model. I can say that definitely from the industry is very happy we see those announcements. Thank you. All right. Next, actually, we have a special speaker that's joined us. Viravot, Director of Medical Device at Thai FDA. Are you able to speak? Please hold on that one.
All right, just give us a second. I think we're getting him access.
Mugan, I'm chatting with Director Varabut. We just forwarded a different link so he can connect using that, and then we'll probably have him being able to also share his screen. So if we can allow for a couple of minutes, we'll appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. I think we are fine.
All right, so we can give him a couple of minutes, and just so we get this conversation moving, Wingang, we've got a couple of questions already, so perhaps we can get through that. I see something about the Thai FDA and Singapore HSA reliance model, so perhaps we can get started with those, and then when Mr. Viravut connects, we'll have his presentation.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, there's a question that came up referring to Thai FDA and Singapore HSA regulatory reliance. Is there any cost implication for both countries? I think that's region will address that.
I'm not sure what they mean by cost implication. If we are referring to the cost implication for industry companies, no additional costs involved because of the reliance is as per normal, whether you register with each country. I'm not sure about the cost in Thailand. Maybe Thai FDA director can elaborate more on it. But because of the reliance, I don't think there is any cost resulting from reliance. That's my reply. Thanks.
Yeah, I believe that because of the way it's set up, right? HSA does not collect fees on that end, and it's just maybe the resource that you need to support this reliance model from HSA's perspective, right? I mean,
correct.
That's the resource aspect, not a direct cost that we share out, but but
that's true. Like I've explained in my slides, resources are required when it comes to requiring the evaluation reports. So going forward, we had discussion with Thai FDA as we progress with the reliance. They are getting more comfortable and more familiar with how we do things. It may not be necessary for them to request for the evaluation reports for each and every product. So as we progress, I think the confidence and trust is built. So it would be probably better in terms of resource management.
Definitely, thank you. Regent, since we got you all here, what do you think are the challenges, right, when you put a reliance model in place, especially when we first started, right, with the abridged evaluation in Singapore? It's really like a unilateral recognition, so to speak, right, of what others have done. What are the challenges you see from that?
I think one major challenge, and actually that is something that industry can help very much, would be that reliance only applies when the device and the models are exactly the same as what it has been approved in the other country. So when you start submitting and applying for devices that are not exactly the same as what is approved in the original country, then it makes things more difficult and complicated. Yeah, so that is a basic criteria. Which companies can help to smoothen it.
Yes, definitely. I think it's required. It's not just regulator looking with regulator, it's also industry making sure that we can support it effectively, so that if there's the efficiency we get from this model then works for everyone. Great, thank you.
It would be not efficient if we have to more time will be required if we have to sieve out which are the ones that are approved in their origin country and which are not. So industry can help in this aspect.
Yes, so that's a great note for industry members to take note of that. That definitely will help every country when they look at reliance model, making sure that you are apple to apple comparison. Don't submit different things. It doesn't help. All right, thank you, Regent. Okay, it looks like our Director Thai FDA has a log on. Are you able to speak? All right. And we lost him again. Okay. Yeah, you are muted, sir.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
we can hear you.
So sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Warawut Somsinsili, Director of Medical Device Control Division Thai FDA. It's my pleasure to share our reliance program experience with Health Science Authority Singapore. You may have questioned why did Thai FDA join reliance program with Singapore. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay. As a member of ASEAN Thai FDA, attend ASEAN Medical Device Committee every meeting, resulting in implementation of ASEAN Medical Device Directive after ratification. Before AMDD implementation, a few medical devices were registered according to policy-based approach using internal reviewer. We realized that after AMDD implementation, there will be enormous number of medical device registration in Thailand. We were looking for many ways to achieve our goal, medical device registration according to AMDD. One approach was to recognize the decisions of other regulatory authority in reaching our own decisions. IFDA have recognized 5 countries member, namely Australia, Canada, EU, Japan, and US FDA. And one institution, namely World Health Organization, since September 2019. This approach was called a concise pathway. There were a few registered using this pathway. We realized that we need to find other ways. Leland pathway was another option, utilizing the best use of available resource and expertise. Many questions were raised, such as which regulatory authority and how to start, and many things. Our questions will come up with criteria for choosing the relying regulatory authority. There were 4 criteria which were equally important as follow. First, comparability of regulatory framework. Second, life cycle approach and post-marketing vigilance. Third, information sharing and dialogue between regulator. And the last, expertise of the relying regulator. Sorry. During one meeting in 2019, before COVID-19 pandemic, Mrs. Wong Wei Chung of Health Science Authority and Mrs. Korapat of Thai FDA discussed with a MDD implementation and then relance program. We agreed to start this program with funding from last year after COVID-19. The training of Leland program was different from other training in terms of hand-on experience on reviewing technical file or workshop. During COVID-19 pandemic, our program was still achieved by online training. Thai FDA prioritized medical device card for such as breast implant and dermal filler to test in the program.
Sorry, have you stopped sharing your slides?
Okay.
Yeah, the slides are no longer visible.
Do you have a problem about my slide? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but your slides
Okay.
have gone off.
Okay, it's come up now, right? Okay. Wait a minute. So sorry. Technical problems. Okay. Okay, can you hear me? Okay. I start and continue. Since 2019, after launch this program, every stakeholder was happy. Our colleague in Thai FDA can evaluate some class 4 medical device such as breast implant and dermal filler, which will be the fundamental to evaluate other medical device in the future. The applicant save time and money for product registration. Our patient can timely access the medical device. The important things to make this program success was trust, resulting from costly dialogue between HSA and Thai FDA. As of 17 February 2023, there are 50 non-IVD medical device and 6 IVD registration using this program. The success of Leland's program between HSA and Thai FDA cannot be happen without 3 persons. Mrs. Wong Wei Chung, Assistant Group Director, Medical Device Cluster, Health Products Regulation Group, Health Science Authority Singapore, Mrs. Korapati Sarasi, former Director, Medical Device Control Division, Thai FDA, and Khun Miang, Regulatory Affairs Committee Chairperson, APACMed. Thank you very much for your leadership. We appreciate all you have done for medical device regulation in Thailand. Thank you very much. If you have any question, you can contact me by email on this line. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, sharing of Thai FDA and Singapore HSS Alliance model. I think that give us more insights. I believe that also answer some of the questions that came up in the Q&A regarding like TAT and so on. But maybe Director Wood, maybe we can just expand what are the challenges you see experience, right, with this Reliance model, right? What are some of the challenges? Maybe you can share how we some of the challenges that how we can other agency when they look at doing this, what can they do to overcome it?
Okay. Challenges is trust between two organizations. I think when we have more dialogue and more training between two organizations, it make the trust between two organizations is the key success factor. I think that.
Yes, trust is definitely important to make sure that it goes in. And I think it's not just trust between agency. We also have to trust industry to do the right thing. Like Ms. Wong, Wee-Jun just now said, if you are submitting on a reliance model, please make sure it's the same model that you are submitting, that you have obtained approval, right, from the other country. I think that goes a long way to help. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I think as I look through some of the questions, maybe we can, Cecilia, maybe we can have you back online here just to answer a few questions. I think there are some questions more on clarification about the Philippine reliance model that's been announced. Yeah.
Hi.
Hello,
Hi, Vince.
Cecilia.
So
Welcome
I
back.
think I'll answer the first one. Is there a possibility that FDA will lessen the technical requirements just like what FDA, SAI, and HSA have? I think we will stick with the original technical documentations as required in our Administrative Order 2018-001, the 002. However, take note that we will not review. We will not have a full review of the technical documents, no? We will just be making sure that it is complete and exactly the same as what you have submitted to the approving country, no? Who issued you the certificate of product registration or its equivalent. But we need that because the importance of having a full technical documentations as required to us by law is in case there will be an adverse event or any post-market surveillance activity, we have already technical documentations that we could easily or immediately review rather than not having it with us. No? So I think that is a non-negotiable. You still need to follow the requirement of Administrative Order 2018-002. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Cecilia. Maybe we can clarify one of the question right at the bottom where they says that I think there's a misunderstanding there that for the reliance model in Philippines, the product has to go through full technical review, and they were saying
okay, we as I have said, there will be no full technical review. No,
I
full
mean they're asking
review.
if it must go through full technical review, like HSA has a bridge evaluation, right? Can you still use that?
We just need to make sure that it is complete. No, it is just browsing if you were able to submit, but no full technical review. Only all the legal requirements that will be reviewed.
Yeah.
So I just
Thank
like
you
to
for
make
the
clear on that.
Yeah, it's an important clarification, right? Because people are like, wow, I need a lot of things.
Yeah, but we need the full
the documents.
technical documents later for consumption later.
No, definitely, I do agree with that. From as an ex-regulator, we know I know the importance of having those documentation at hand when we need to make sure things happen when things happen on the field, right? We cannot just at that point and go back and ask for documents. It'll be a bit late for us. Right? I appreciate that, and I think that is the more appropriate thing to do. I think having a reliance model is not about just taking an approval cert and saying I approve it. We still need to follow due process in the country. I think Wee-Jun has also pointed out it's also about independence, right? At the end of the day, the National Regulatory Authority has full independence on accepting that, and we respect that. I think that's important to remember that. I think okay, great, ladies and gentlemen. I think we are almost to the hour. So I would like to ask our three panelists here, maybe just in a sentence, right? Just to sum up, how do you see the future of regulatory reliance in making product registration more streamlined going ahead? Cecilia, what do you think since you're on the line now?
Okay. We have learned from this pandemic issue, and we were able to prove that reliance worked during this pandemic. No? So if we do not rely to other regulatory agency on the approval of all this, for example, test kits, we cannot have our own test kits available here in the Philippines. So I think starting from that, we could improve the different reliance model that we have, no? And for the Philippines, we have started it with the Asean because we understand the regulation. Because for this reliance thing to work, we need first to understand the regulation of the country whom we are embracing, no, or whom we are recognizing their regulatory system, and aside from, of course, trust on how they do things, no. So I think there will be a future on this reliance thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Vision, what about you? How do you see the future of reliance model going forward? How do you see that future coming out? Right.
I fully agree with Cecilia. And starting from ASEAN, actually ASEAN is at a very good position to explore reliance because we have our AMDD, which we harmonize almost everything from pre to post. And we are very clear about the regulatory framework for the 10 ASEAN countries in terms of definition, risk classification, the dossier requirement. These are these are the things that allows us to embark on reliance because we don't have to even start comparing with the relying countries whether your regulatory requirements are similar to decide. We already know it's similar, it's there. So therefore, yeah, there is the impetus to do reliance is low. And of course, ASEAN, we are close. We have twice weekly, twice yearly meeting in AMDC. We know each other well. So taking another step to do reliance, building the trust is easier as well. So I see that reliance is the way to go for, especially for medical devices, because medical device is very broad. No any country, and if you see, I think even US FDA, they do have the MDSAP. Nobody has the resources to do everything. So we could choose to do reliance on one part and not on the other part. And also for countries, you can then concentrate your expertise on things that there's no way to do reliance. For example, investigating the adverse event in your country. That is possibly not possible. You have to do the investigating yourself. So that may not be possible to do reliance. You can share but you can't do reliance on that. Maybe concentrating on that, and maybe concentrating on developing policies and for new emerging kind of medical devices, digital health, pharmaceuticals, which are in the, we need resources to do that as well. So leveraging on everybody's effort is the key to moving forward. I think that's how I feel about reliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Vision. What are your views? How can we now? How do you foresee moving beyond, right, the reliance Singapore HSM?
In my opinion, now we are the good direction. I will plan to expand the reliance program, and I think a lesson learned from the past is very necessary and important. I try to learning from the lesson learned and have the plan to next step to expand this program. Thank you.
Great. I think that's a lot of lessons. So maybe another aspect, right? How can industry help the regulators to implement the reliance model? What can industry, from an industry perspective, right? How can the industry support countries, right? Country regulators to embark on to expand the current reliance model that you have and make it more efficient, right? Maybe we can ask Vijay, what do you think?
I have mentioned earlier on one of the things that I think industry can help, which is to make sure that the products that they use for reliance are the same. I think maybe in terms of reliance, transparency is required. And also industry have to understand that sometimes when we do reliance, between regulators, we need to share information. So if you noted the Thai reliance with HSA and Thai FDA, we have industry to sign the consent to allow us to share. So that is also something that industry have to be aware that it will happen and not be uncomfortable about it. I think that would facilitate reliance.
Yes, definitely, right? What about Cecilia? What do you think? From your point of view, how can industry work to facilitate the reliance model to help make it easier for regulators to implement it?
Okay, in my opinion, what is important is that the regulatory officer should read the technical documentations that they will submit to the regulatory agency. Have it really organized and submit what is needed. No? So even if that is reliance, they should be able to make sure that the technical documentations that they will submit is exactly the one that was submitted as the requirement in the Philippines, that the one that they will submit to us is exactly the same documents that they submitted to the country who have approved the product within the ASEAN member countries. And they will be able to identify all these technical documentations based on the documentations or the requirements of the Philippines. I think we can opt not to arrange it, according to the Philippines requirements, how we do it in the checklist. However, they could provide us a table of contents and identify where we could find it. So that way we could easily locate all those technical documentations if it is not arranged in accordance to our checklist. So that way we could have an easier evaluations of their technical documents to ensure that. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. I think yeah, every little tidbit help, right, to facilitate that. Yeah, Director, what are your views? How can industry?
I agree with Wei Jung and Cecilia, and I think now we are very happy with this program. The manufacturing and importer is very happy, and because it has the short time registration and save cost of registration. I think they should support this program by voice to the policymaker to support the continuity of this program. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. It's not just something that every country from policy point of view, we need to adopt it and ensure that it is in place, right, before you can actually start accepting that. I think as I think from Philippines, Madam Cecilia said, Philippine FDA actually have to publish that, right, as an official announcement out, so that they make it as a standard, right, for them to be able to receive those documentation under the breach evaluation route. Definitely, we can see that coming. Right. So I think that's a question that I think from Philippine point of view, I think Ms. Cecilia had already pointed out that No, there will be slight differences in some of the way CSDT are put together in some countries, because I think although we all adopt CSDT, there's some variation, right, depending on what happens in the country. We do submit slightly different layout. I think the other question then is really, with this layout change, slight variation, how does that impact, right? Do you all see it as a major challenge? Or do you think that it's not a big issue so long as all the models that are covered are there, right? It is so long as there's no new models, maybe, then that will add to the complexity. Wei-Zhen, what is your view on that, right? If Singapore move towards a reliance a model with other ASEAN country, and we have slight differences in CSDT submission template.
I'm not sure what exactly is meant by slight difference, but in my opinion, if let's say the type of documents are the same, but maybe in the type of arrangements may be different, that's fine. But of course, we always allow for some local requirements. I know some countries, because of the local language requirement that is needed, so that may be one of the additional. That's probably what I can think of as like difference, which probably would not make a major difference, because that's when you actually like if there's a local requirement that is not in the major CSDT requirements, then that is where the local regulatory authority will have to review whether it meets or not. So in that sense, I don't see there's a big issue with in terms of having slight changes, slight difference in the CSDT. I won't say change, because I don't think we changed the CSDT, but just maybe add on a little bit of local requirements. Yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the challenge sometimes as countries get experience with the CSDT, some evaluator will ask additional thing for clarification, right? And then sometimes industry may think of it as, oh, we are deviating from CSDT, but I think that's not really the case. It's more clarification, right? As we clarify,
Correct.
we get experience
Correct.
with the CSDT, remembering that CSDT is a template, right? A template for us to work on.
So I won't
Definitely.
call that as a difference in the CSDT, because the basic requirements are still the same, but you may need, like you say, clarification on the requirements. Yeah.
Do we? Okay. All of a sudden the screens change. All right. Maybe Wei-Zhen, what do you think about there's a question out here that would Singapore start looking at how to accept recognize approval from other ASEAN countries? Is that something that Singapore is looking at?
At this moment, we are not actively looking at yet. We're not saying no to it, but it's just because I think Singapore started regulating using ASEAN very early on, so we had more experience in it. But if there is ASEAN countries who want to do work sharing based on the CSDT, I think we are open to it. Yes.
Yes, I think that should answer the question. It's a different model of reliance, right, that Singapore is looking at. I think definitely it is helpful for all the countries, right? It's sharing of experience Singapore had.
And
done,
also for Singapore is, also for Singapore, I mean, it will reduce the resource that we need if they're sharing. So we just do certain part of it and the other. So it's also beneficial for Singapore. Yes.
Definitely. Great. Thank you. And I think we should maybe just remind the audience, right, as Wei-Zhen had presented just now, there are multiple models of reliance available. And I think each country, based on their needs, right, will have to determine what is the correct model for them to adopt and at which point in time, right? There's no right or wrong, is what is appropriate at that point in time for that country due to their resources, the constraint, and whatever, right? So I think I know from an industry perspective, we would like everyone to recognize everyone. I think industry always wants that, but we need to have the regulators to be confident, to have that trust, and work together, right? I think we're moving towards that. I see that coming. Well, I think we are for the last few years, we're seeing good progress on that. And I definitely think that from ASEAN's perspective, we definitely can move ahead with more reliance, different models, depending on the needs of the country, different cooperation between the regulators definitely will move us towards better cooperation, and hopefully for the industry, easier submission, right, to get our products approved in the different countries as needed. We keep losing. Okay. I think let's see if there's any other questions that I think the time TAT approval, I think that have been if you look at the guidelines, you will see that that's done. Every country published their timelines on that. Just remember, timelines the guide from industry. I'll tell you that. All right. Hey, I believe we've actually answered all the questions. Is there any more questions?
I think there's one more we've got from Matthew in the main chat.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So we can perhaps answer that and then wrap it up.
Yeah. All right. Good. That's in the main chat. It says if a product has received clearance in the national regulatory agencies such as US, EU, Canada, Australia, and Japan, could ASEAN regulators in Philippines and Thailand, for example, give those here a faster clearance rather than only favoring product clearance from Singapore or other ASEAN economies? I thought I've answered that myself just now, but it's okay. I'll leave Cecilia to maybe pick up the first part. I'll give a shot at that.
Can you please repeat it again? I was not able to get it.
No, so because she's in Philippines right now, you're only recognizing ASEAN. They are now looking at when would, maybe the question is, when would Philippines start recognizing like the GHTF founding members, right? We still call them that, although now IMBIF.
Yeah, we are already looking into that, but there are some regulations among the GHTF. We
Cecilia, I think we are losing your signal. You're breaking up.
Oh, am I breaking up?
Yeah,
Am I clear now?
Yes, you're clear now.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. We are already looking into that, but we really need to be very careful with that policy, considering that they have different models of regulations. And we need to understand, for example, for US, it's not the same with us yet, no? So they are, for example, they have different classification. It's not the same with what we are implementing, no? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, if they have already harmonized with our classifications, but looking into their documentations, they are still using the CFR, no? And we have a totally different models. So I think for the US, it will be totally different because we do not consider the 510K yet, no? Because that is a different thing. For the EU, yes, we could look into that. That's the reason why we need to be very, very careful in accepting all other certificates, because what is very important to us is we do need to understand the regulations first. No? Unlike with the ASEAN, we have a common understanding and we have a common agreement, no, being implemented. That's the reason why it is we can easily rely on them, because we are have meeting of minds and doing the same thing. No? So, but we will get into that. We are not closing our doors in accepting Reliance for all this, our godfathers. No, we could consider them godfathers because we have reviewed and used their documents, no, especially the GHTF. But of course, the GHTF technical documentations is one thing, but how it was being implemented by the different countries that we as a regulatory agencies need to understand is another thing. No? So if we will accept it in total, especially the technical documentations, we need to be very, very careful because at the end of the day, it is the Philippine Regulatory Agency who will be accountable in any adverse event, no, or whatever not good for that particular device that we have approved using the Reliance model. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I definitely agree with that. Definitely a very good point. We must be comfortable, right? As a country, we need to be comfortable with what we are accepting, and we need to understand how they get the approval, right? That's very important. What about from Thailand? What about Thailand side? Do we have are there plans in the pipeline to increase Reliance model? Hello.
Hello. Hello. Hello. Good
Hello.
morning. Can you please ask a question again?
Yes. No, Thailand currently has the Reliance model with Singapore HSA. Do
Yeah.
you see how about the other countries, especially the GHTF countries, US, Europe, Canada, Australia, Japan? Is Thai FDA looking into expanding your Reliance model with those countries?
Oh, we like the Singapore and Philippines that we looking for the chance to expand our Reliance program. But however, Reliance and recognition is totally different. Recognition is only to see the certificate of the registration, but Reliance to build the capacity building. For the big 5 countries like that, it's difficult for us to get the assessment report. As our director mentioned that the difficult part of the Reliance program is the dialogue or communication. Yeah. But I would like to add more thing that for the recognition, for the time frame or the timetable is very short. And it's like the Reliance program, the time is short and we wait for the expert review fee. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. I think thank you everyone. I think we can safely say that ASEAN as a whole is really advancing on the Reliance model. And I think as Wee Jun has pointed out, she has defined what Reliance, defined what are the different types of Reliance model that are available. I think that's very important for us to remember, right? Reliance is not a single model. There are variation to it. And as all speakers have pointed out, right, it's about trust. It's about getting to know the partner that you're partnering with, to have that confidence of accepting taking that approval to use that, right, as the basis for your own approval in your country. I think that takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of confidence building. And I think what we have seen for Thai FDA and Singapore HSA model is they did take some time, right, to work towards getting it into the current model where now it covers all the higher risk products like class B, C, and D. So I think that's definitely something moving ahead that countries can take a look and see how this model can work, right, as we work on the countries look at partnership. So I think Philippines has moved ahead with that. I think it's Philippine FDA definitely take a huge step forward. But I think that based on trust, right, based on knowing what is the regulatory model that every country has, because the ASEAN has our agreement or medical device directive, we are all working on the same platform. The structure is there. Local implementation might vary a bit, but the framework is there for us to cooperate. And I think with that, definitely, I see ASEAN being able to move forward with Reliance model as a much stronger, right, cooperation between the countries than from outside. But slowly, I definitely believe, as some of our speakers have pointed out, that we are definitely going to see more cooperation with other agencies around the world. And I think that should be something that industry also can look forward to, not just regulators. Industry also like to see that. And hopefully we can see more things coming out in the near future. With this, I would like to thank all our distinct speakers here for joining us on this panel. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and sharing your views and knowledge on how things have worked on the Reliance model. And thank you, the organizer, for putting this all together. And we'll see you again in our session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Right. Thank you, Wingang and the speakers. And there was quite a lot of details to cover. We are slightly ahead of time, so let's have a quick break and be back by 12:30. So at 10:30 Jakarta time, so that's about 13 minutes for you to stretch your legs and have a quick drink and be back. See you shortly. All right, welcome back, everybody. Let's get started with our next panel on post-market surveillance. We will hear perspectives from both the government and private sector representatives on obligations and regulations to meet high levels of standards to ensure safety of medical devices in the market. We have Adrian Inobli, Regional Advisor, Medical Products Regulation, WHO, moderating the session. Our panel speakers are Anita Sands, Technical Officer, Incident and Substandard Falsified Medical Products Team, World Health Organization. We also have Lai Ling Liu, Regulatory Consultant, Health Sciences Authority, Singapore, Dina Kusmawati, Team Leader, Medical Device Product Supervision, Ministry of Health, Indonesia, and Nicole Taylor-Smith, Global Head of Regulatory Science and Policy from Philips. We will have Adrian take us away.
Yeah, good morning, colleagues. So I understand that we have a good panel today to discuss the, sorry, I was taken off guard. Yeah, so we have a good panel today that is connected to discuss the post-market surveillance of medical devices, and especially the particular role of regulators, but also the private sector. So we're not fully aligned with what usually is done for medicines or for other products. And over the past years, regulators have worked together with the private sector to try to find a model that would work to balance both the safety and the quality of the medical devices, but also ensure that regulators and all stakeholders in the field have adequate capacity to look after all the complex aspects that are related to this particular field. There are many more products when it comes to medical devices with a huge diversity, which requires a very wide panel of expertise and competencies. And to address this particular situation, the models that have been developed first by the IMDRF and most recently by the WHO have given a particular emphasis on the role of the manufacturers, complementing the role of the national regulatory authorities, and also together with other important actors, such as, for example, the importers or the wholesalers. So today, the panel will be discussing the implication of these guidances that have been developed by the IMDRF and the WHO. And I understand that, Mugant, you will be introducing the panel participants now. Thank you very much. And looking forward to a very rich discussion and presentations.
Right. Thank you, Adrian. I believe our first up, we've got Anita's presentation. So we'll screen that first. Anita, as I mentioned, is from the World Health Organization's Incidents and Substandard Falsified Medical Devices Products team. So let's hear from her, and then we'll go on to the other speakers. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anita Sands, and I'm going to present to you a little bit about WHO's support for countries, including Indonesia, on how to do post-market surveillance for IVDs. Why it's important to monitor the quality, safety and performance of medical devices once they're on the market is that the risk-benefit profile can change. You know, products change over time, the way they're manufactured, the way the components are sourced. So there's inherent variability in the product, but also you have usability, you have the environment, you have unforeseen failure, and also you might have misuse of a device. So today I'm actually going to present a practical case study that illustrates a little bit of how you might put WHO's guidance on post-market surveillance into action. I'm going to present to you a case study about a malaria rapid diagnostic test that was suspected to be substandard and related to a high number or an unexpected high rate of false positive results. The reason that this was actually identified was that patients were retested on another brand of malaria rapid test and they were found to be negative. So some products, one product found them to be positive and the other product found them to be negative. In this case, what the national authorities did was they implemented a nationwide quarantine for the specific lot number where the results were found to be false positive. And what they recommended to those health sites is that they should do an alternative using microscopy or even another rapid test, or should just do presumptive treatment. The facility manager notified the manufacturer of the complaint related to the product. So at this point, what are really the obligations and the expectations that you as a regulator would have of a manufacturer of an IVD, or for that case, any type of medical device? Post-market surveillance is the process by which the manufacturer collects and analyses the experiences with their product once it's on the market. And what we're expecting is that manufacturers have a post-market surveillance plan for every product that they have, or a group of similar products, where they're considering all of the user feedback about their products and any complaints about quality, perhaps adverse events that are reported through safety mechanisms. Anytime a request is made for technical support, technical assistance, if it's an analyzer or an instrument, that there might be a maintenance call. Also through reviewing the scientific literature and looking for other cases where a product, either their product or a similar product, may have some documented evidence about the way it's performing in the field. Obviously also looking at even the own production records of the manufacturer and doing post-market performance follow-up in some instances. And obviously the manufacturer then should actually be able to then determine if the incident is reportable to a regulator and be conducting a root cause analysis, which is the main role that you as a regulator will have is reviewing these root cause analyses. And also you would review any decision made by a manufacturer to do a correction. And that's normally when you don't move the device from where it is. And this might be something like a modification to the labeling or the way that it's used. But they might also decide on some sort of corrective or preventive action. And that's normally at the level of the production facility where they might change the way they're manufacturing a product. In terms of what are the roles of you as the regulators vis-a-vis post-market surveillance? Well, if you do get any sort of user feedback, such as a complaint or an adverse event that's reported to you as the regulator, you should immediately forward that to the manufacturer. You may indeed decide to do that via the local authorised representative, but the most important element is that it gets to the legal manufacturer in the end, because they have the global view on everybody else that might have received that lot. They'll be able to look at the global complaint file, they'll be able to look at the production records, and so they'll be able to conduct a fuller sort of risk analysis about the potential for this incident to actually change that risk-benefit profile. The main role that you'll have as a regulator is reviewing manufacturer investigation reports. That's what I do for products that are WHO pre-qualified or emergency use listed. You'll also be reviewing field safety corrective actions. So, this is more like a recall, or maybe they might just say, like, destroy the product and replace it with a new product. So you would need to be reviewing, is this an adequate risk mitigation approach? And also deciding if any other regulatory action is required, and even making sure that you can share that information with other regulators. And I highly recommend that you have a public repository of field safety notices. Doesn't need to be of the incident reports, but of the field safety notices when there's actually been, an action that's been recommended to users. So I'm going to circle back to the case study that I was just talking about, and this actually did happen in real life. This is, again, the malaria test where the manufacturer conducted their investigation and they sent the report to the NRA for them to review. The NRA reviewed the root cause analysis that the manufacturer had conducted, and what they saw was that the affected lot, there was actually retained samples of that lot. The manufacturer is required to retain samples throughout the shelf life. So they keep it at the site, at the manufacturing site, up until the point when the product expires. That's about as much room as they probably have in their warehouse. And so in this case, the manufacturer tested those retained samples, and they found that they complied with all the specifications. Also reviewed the complaint records for this lot and found no other complaints. They then looked at all the complaints for this product, so not just this lot, but this entire product. No other complaints. And they reviewed their batch manufacturing records, what actually happened on the day they manufactured this affected lot. They found no deviations from the documented procedures, no other non-conformances, and so this was really what was presented to the regulator. But as a regulator, when you're looking at this sort of information, what is it that you really should be looking for? And I will tell you what I look for when I'm reviewing an investigation report. I'm looking to make sure they did a root cause analysis, the how and why did this happen, and did they analyse to see if this would impact any other areas. And why I'm saying this is, for example, if it's a malaria rapid test and it's one that detects falciparum, did it also affect the other product that they have that is a falciparum and Vivax detecting malaria test? Does it affect their HIV tests that use the same components, perhaps the same nitrocellulose, the same cassettes? And also, did they actually consider the scale and scope? So this is really around understanding where else that product has been sent to, that affected lot, and understanding if it's just this lot or other lots that are potentially affected. And I'm certainly looking to see if they're using a documented procedure and a tool such as a fishbone diagram, which you'll see here, which is a very commonly used methodology for ruling out root causes until you can come to either a confirmed root cause or a probable root cause. I also look very much at the testing that's done on retained samples of the affected lots, because it really does help you to rule out systemic manufacturing defect, which is, the first thing you want to rule out. I look at what type of specimens did they use. Did they use the final QC lot release? Did they use a specific panel? Did they use venous or capillary whole blood? And look at the intended use and see if what testing they've done really mimics the intended use setting. How did they decide it was acceptable? How did they decide that there was no problem with specificity or no problem with sensitivity? And did they look at things other than just the sensitivity and specificity? Look at the physical inspection of the components and look at if there was anything untoward. Obviously, you have a period under which you will be reviewing their investigation report, but if you're anything like some of the bigger regulators that are receiving many incident reports, you'll be having thousands of these a month, maybe tens of thousands of these a year. And so you need to be able to look at each investigation report and be able to conclude very quickly about whether there needs to be any more action from your side. So in the case that we're just talking about, none of the observations that were in the complaint report could be replicated by the manufacturer. And they were actually able to rule out a systemic manufacturing defect, but they were not really able to give me what was the actual probable root cause, anything beyond it could have been storage, it could have been the way the product was used. And so I think that's really important, that you may not always have a root cause, but if you can at least rule out systemic manufacturing defect, that is, a really fundamental root cause that you need to rule out or rule in. And if it can be ruled out, then you can start to work with your healthcare professionals to try to rule in, was it something to do with the way the product was stored? Was it stored outside of the recommended storage conditions? Was there something unusual about the way in which the product was used? Was there something unusual about the population that was being tested? So for malaria, it might be that perhaps there was another mass administration of chemoprophylaxis for malaria. There might have been insecticide spraying of households. There might have been, if you're looking at sensitivity, it might be that you might be in a zone where a HRP2 deletion could be a root cause. And so very quickly being able to rule whether or not there's been an adequate enough interrogation of the root cause is a really important step that you as a regulator would need to take. I also very much use reliance for investigation reports. If an investigation report has been submitted to the EU, for example, and they forward me the same investigation report, I ask them what was the finding of that regulator. So if the European Union reviewed the investigation and they didn't have any cause for concern, then maybe I shouldn't need any cause for concern either. And I can rely on that, as well as taking into context my national epidemiology and any national considerations, and go, okay, I can probably rely on other well-resourced, well-functioning regulators. If they think that this root cause was okay, maybe I can as well. And this is where sharing any field safety notices that result out of an incident are really important as well. You can rely on those and use those. I think risk assessment is a really important part of what you do as a regulator. You need to look at the severity of the incident and the frequency of which it's happening. So if it's just isolated to one site, if it's across many districts or many provinces, you would look at the risks slightly differently about your need to expend more regulatory resources. And in terms of severity, is it leading to death or serious deterioration in health? Is this leading to misdiagnosis? If the misdiagnosis means that patients don't get treatment, will they die as a result? Now, for malaria, it might be that if you don't have parasitological confirmation, the patient doesn't get treatment. If they don't get treatment, they could have a very serious outcome. If it's something like HIV, you don't get treatment, maybe you'll have testing at a later point in time, or you'll get treatment eventually. So looking at these best and worst case scenarios, over treatment, under treatment, or where there's interruption to services. And also just to say, I use the IMDRF terminology to code all of the incident reports I have, so that when I put them into my database, I can very easily share this with anybody, even if you don't speak the same language. The codes will help me to bridge that gap. So all of the advice that I've just talked about here today is actually contained in the WHO guidance on post-market surveillance and market surveillance. It covers all medical devices, including IVDs. I gave you an IVD case study today because that's the product class that I feel most comfortable with. It's the one I have the most experience with. And what we recommend as WHO is nothing unusual. It's very much reflecting international standards and guidance, particularly the ISO guidance on post-market surveillance for manufacturers and the IMDRF's work on adverse event reporting. I invite you to all go and look at this document. We have it available in all UN languages, but particularly English. And if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to contact me directly. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much, Anita, for a very practical presentation, and especially for the focus on how regulators can approach market surveillance. I would just like to use also that opportunity to further invite the participants. If you have any questions related to post-market surveillance and market surveillance to the panel, then please use the chat or the Q&A function to share all your questions for the panels, and this will be addressed at the end of this session. For the time being, we will now move to our next panelist. So our next panelist is Leiling Liu. She has been working for now a long time at the Health Science Authority and is a regulatory consultant there. And she will be presenting the IMDRF guideline on post-market surveillance, National Competent Authority report exchange criteria and report form, and also the IMDRF terminologies for categorized adverse event reporting. So over to you, Leiling. Thank you.
Hi, sorry about that. I got disconnected. Okay, very good morning, a very good afternoon, a very good evening, everyone. My name is Leiling from the Medical Device Cluster on Health Sciences Authority Singapore. I'm very happy today to be given the opportunity to be part of this workshop to share on the IMDRF adverse event terminology. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. Let me first give a brief introduction of the IMDRF Adverse Event Terminology Working Group. The Adverse Event Working Group was formed in 2015 with the mission to develop a harmonized terminology for reporting adverse events, both for GMDs, general medical devices, as well as IVDs, and to improve the efficiency of AE management systems. And with the use of a single harmonized adverse event terminology or coding system, the benefits are numerous, and I think Anita has extorted the benefits as well. But this would definitely include improving the accuracy and reducing ambiguity of medical device related adverse events. And with the use of the codes, in contrast to free text or basically narrative text, this would help and facilitate signal detection and trending analysis, allowing better querying functions and data visualizations. And ultimately, what we want is faster response from both the regulatory agencies as well as industries. Next slide, please. So the IMDRF adverse event terminology, there are in total 7 annexes. So as you can see, Annex A to G, the diagram on the right gives a quick snapshot of what each annex represents. Broadly, the annexes can be divided into 3 categories. So firstly, the device or component codes. So essentially what we're answering here is what is the problem at the device level? What is happening? Something broke, or as Anita mentioned, false negatives. This is the problem that we need to code. And of course, which particular component or a particular part of the device which was involved in the incident. Then the second broad category is the cause investigation. So the Annex B, C, and D. Essentially what we're trying to capture here is the probable causes of the problem. So what type of investigation was being carried out, over the findings, and essentially the conclusion that can be drawn. And the last category of codes are the patient codes. So essentially what the adverse event is happening at the patient's level. So what are the health effects to the patient? What are the clinical signs and symptoms and conditions that the patient is exhibiting? What is the health impact on the patient? So broadly, these are the categories of the codes. I'll go into detail in the next slide. So this provides further explanation on each of the annexes. So Annex A describes the device problems, whether there's a malfunction, deterioration of function, or failure. So as I mentioned earlier, example, a catheter broke, an implant migrated, they were false positive for IVD assays. These are the device problem that we code. And G, as I mentioned again, the specific component or part of the medical device that is involved in the event, if this is available. So for example, the cautery tip, or the battery, or the circuit board. So this can be coded in Annex G. Annex B essentially is the type of investigation that's being carried out. So whether the device was returned to the manufacturer for device testing, or whether essentially the device was already discarded, it was not available for testing, and ultimately the manufacturer could only do a production records review or a download of their log files. So these are all captured in Annex B. And Annex C captures the findings of the investigation. So essentially it's a more higher level Annex A code. So for example, that in this case of when a catheter broke, then we would code for mechanical problem was identified, or whether there was a biological contamination that was identified. So this is coded in Annex C. Annex D captures the conclusion derived from the investigation and specifies the root cause if that is available. So, and of course, as a regulator's point of view, the most important annex root cause would be the whole event, the whole adverse events was due to a cause that could be traced to a device design, because that would be something that obviously the manufacturer has to look into and make changes to the design. Or it could possibly just be the cause traced to the user, not following the IFU, off-label use, etc. So all these are coded in Annex D. And as I mentioned, Annex E and F, these are on the patient level. So Annex E describes the clinical signs and symptoms that are displayed by the patient. And it's all important to also note that Annex E is actually a subset of the MEDRA terms. So for those who are not familiar, MEDRA is a medical dictionary that's used by our pharmaceutical colleagues to describe clinical signs and symptoms for drug AE reporting. So, but it's important to highlight that at this point that the clinical signs and symptoms that is being coded for is not meant to describe pre-existing clinical signs or symptoms, but the observed clinical signs or symptoms as a result of the medical device adverse event. So some examples would be a bowel perforation, hemorrhage, granuloma formation, and Annex F describes the consequence of the adverse event. So example, of course, the worst case scenario as a result of the adverse event, death. There's a need to explant the device, or whether there's blood transfusion required, a wrong diagnosis. So all these are coded for in Annex F. Okay, so next slide, please. Right. So now that I've described the IMDRF-AE terminology, you may be asking where to find the IMDRF-AE terminology. So this is freely available on our IMDRF website. So you can just scan the QR code on the top right-hand corner, which will bring you directly to the landing page for the IMDRF-AE terminologies. So you can scroll all the way to the bottom, and what you have is what you see on the slides. So the IMDRF terminology is available in two formats. So you can enter the Excel format, that's the link on top here. So once you click into that link, what you get is the next slide. So this is how it will look like. So these are the individual annexes. You can download them individually, and they're available in the JSON and Excel formats. Alternatively, you can use the web browser, in which basically you, next slide please, it's a user-friendly search browser. So you can key in whatever search term that you need. And of course, you have to go to the individual annexes because it's not. And then from there, you can look for the most appropriate term to describe your adverse event. So to note as well, if you look at the browser, there are several higher level parent terms as well as more detailed child terms that allows for more detailed coding. So as you can see, there's this plus sign. So if you manage to get into the browser and you click on this plus sign, it will be expanded and you have more detailed codes and terms. And it's always advisable to code the most detailed term if possible, if that information is available. Okay, and lastly, on the maintenance of the RMDRF AE terminologies. So as with all terminologies and codes, it requires maintenance. So there'll be additions, deletion, or modification of existing terms. So this is done by the IMDRF AE working group, the same one that actually came up with the annexes. So the terminology is always open for change requests, but there is a cutoff date for inclusion in the next release, 1st September of every year. So we've just finished our maintenance cycle for last year, 2022, and this will be published, and it's actually already published. If you actually manage to go onto our website, the 2023 release version, which take into consideration all the change requests submitted before 1st September 2022, has been reviewed and published on the website. Also, one thing to note is that the request for addition or modification or deletion of terms has to be submitted to the AE work group by a national competent authority or a stakeholder organization using the prescribed change request form. We don't accept individual requests. So yeah, I think that's about it. Okay, there's a last slide which basically shows the change log. So as I mentioned previously in the previous slide, there's the prescribed format which we will require if you would like to submit change requests. So this is the prescribed format, and it's essential to remember that you need to include the rationale for the inclusion, as well as to give a specific example citing a specific device. So that's easier for the working group to understand the need for the new term or to modify an existing term. So yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you very much for everyone's attention.
All right. Thank you very much, Leilin, for your comprehensive presentation on the terminology for adverse event reporting. This is, of course, an essential aspect to develop a common language between manufacturers and regulators, and having a common terminology is also something that is essential. For example, if we want to detect signals or just to make sure that the events are properly detected in general. So thank you very much for your presentation. So we heard during the first presentation a general model on post-market surveillance and market vigilance. Then we heard the efforts from IMDRF on developing terminologies. And so now we will be hearing from Dini Kusumavati, who's a team leader in the medical device product supervision unit in the Ministry of Health in Indonesia, and she will be providing us with the perspective from a regulator on post-market surveillance. So over to you, Dini, and looking forward to your presentation. And just a reminder also to participants to use the Q&A function or the chat box to ask for any question you would like the panel to address at the end of this session. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dini.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. My voice is clear. Is my voice clear?
Loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Adrian. Good morning, distinguished guests, panelists, and participants. Thank you for this opportunity to be part of this panel about post-market surveillance. Today, I will presenting about post-market surveillance in regulator's perspective. So let me introduce myself first. My name is Dini Kusmawati, and now I am a team leader for medical device product control at Directorate of Post-Market Control, Ministry of Health, Indonesia. Okay, a little overview about the topics today. So according to the WHO, that the post-market surveillance is a set of activities conducted by manufacturers to collect and evaluate experience gained from medical device that have been placed on the market and to identify the need to take any action. So we have already do this harmonization. So the IMDRF has elaborated on requirement for post-market surveillance, harmonization of this requirement across regulatory environment, and reporting guideline for adverse events, as we already see before. And then the WHO has already released guidance on 2021 on post-market surveillance and market surveillance of medical device, including in vitro diagnostic. So what our challenge is, there's a need to collaborate with the industry, specifically in giving feedback from users, clients, or patients to manufacturers to uphold medical device and standards. So maybe we can discuss it later. Okay, let's talk about this market surveillance and post-market surveillance. So in this guideline, there are two surveillance. First of all is market surveillance. So this is the activities carried out and measures taken by competent authorities. So this is regulatory authorities to check and ensure that the device comply with the requirements set out in the relevant legislation and do not endanger health, safety, or any other aspect of public interest protection. And the other side is post-market surveillance. So this is the systemic process to collect and analyze experience gained from medical devices that have been placed on the market. So post-market surveillance include the action taken by the manufacturer based on the analysis data. Manufacturers should report certain incidents to NRAs and keep them updated on the actions taken. The NRA will review the investigation undertaken by manufacturers and the further actions taken. This is connected to the market surveillance responsibility of NRAs. So market surveillance comprises the total package of activities undertaken by NRA to obtain an oversight of medical device on the market in their territory and to ensure that the safety, quality, and performance of medical device on the market continues to be adequate. So the most basic form of post-market surveillance, which shall always be performed, is reactive post-market surveillance. Reactive post-market surveillance is done through collection and evaluation feedback. All feedback is evaluated to establish the severity of the incident and establish if it should be reported to the NRA. A root cause investigation might be launched and further action undertaken, such as correction or corrective action. Post-market surveillance linked to the risk management. A risk management process should be implemented by all manufacturers of medical device. All stakeholders, including manufacturers and their economic operators, regulatory authorities, healthcare professionals, healthcare institutions, and patients, need to understand that the use of a medical device involves an inherent degree of risk. NRA should raise awareness among users and clients or patients about the importance of providing feedback to manufacturers and their economic operators for post-market surveillance. Users and clients or patients, as well as implementers or procurers, should be enabled to provide feedback to manufacturers and their economic operators. So this is the implementation of market surveillance by NRAs. This actually more than 4 points, but I only review for big points in here. The first one is forward feedback and conduct risk assessment. And then sorry. And then review manufacturers' investigation reports, and then overseas testing between reactive and proactive testing. And the last one is collect other post-market information. So market surveillance is a set of activities conducted by NRA to ensure that medical device use in their market continues to meet safety, quality, and performance requirements. So we should develop a system to receive feedback directly from users and their patient or clients, and to forward it on to the manufacturers. NRA may conduct a risk assessment when forwarding feedback to ensure that a registered or authorized medical device is the subject of the feedback. So NRA also reserves the right to directly contact the manufacturer for additional information such as investigation reports, FACA reports, or FSNs. So there are challenges for NRA. So we should raise awareness among users and clients about the importance of providing feedback to manufacturers and the economic operators for post-market surveillance. All stakeholders, including manufacturers and their economic operators, regulatory, healthcare professional, need to understand that the use of a medical device involves an inherent degree of risk. So users and clients or patients, as well as implementers, should be enabled to provide feedback to manufacturers. Feedback from users and patient or clients on the safety, quality, and performance of medical device is crucial importance. Although users have no official responsibility for post-market surveillance, most of the information on the experience with the actual use of medical device will come from users. They should be encouraged to provide feedback and thereby take their role in the post-market surveillance process. So NRS needs to build a system that connecting between every stakeholder, including manufacturer, healthcare professional, healthcare institution, and user operation on the safety, quality, and performance medical device. So this is, I think this is playing the most important role in post-market surveillance. Thank you for this opportunity. Back to you, Adrian.
Thank you very much, Dini, for your very good presentation on the perspectives from Indonesian regulator on the regulation of medical device for post-market surveillance. So we now have had one presentation on the global model. We had one presentation from Singapore on the work that IMDRF has been doing to assist all the actors in speaking the same language and is working together, especially through developing standardized terminologies. And now we just heard from one regulator on their perspective on market surveillance. So to be complete now, we will need also to hear perspectives from the industry, which is another very important stakeholders with respect to post-market surveillance. And to do this, I will now give the floor to Nicole Taylor-Smith, who's Global Head, Regulatory Science and Policy at Philips, and will provide us with the industry perspective. So over to you, Nicole. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just pulling up my slides now. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to be here and to share some industry perspectives. I appreciate all of the voices we've heard today and yesterday. The presentations have been just unbelievable and really helpful, and I've learned a lot actually in the last 2 days as well. And I thank you to the MDRC for inviting me to share a few thoughts on industry's perspective. In preparing for this presentation, I reached out to a number of people. I've had the good fortune of being on both sides of the aisle, as they like to say, both as a former FDA regulator and now on the industry side. And what I've really been able to see is if we focus on the same thing, which we are, of our patients, we can always find commonalities and always do the right thing. And so I've, dedicated my career on the public health side, on the industry side of really what can I do in service of patients. And I think that this topic is really critical to that. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So like I said, I had the opportunity to sort of talk to a number of folks in preparing for this and sort of saying, I'm here talking, more globally, not as myself or my company, but from industry's perspective, what are some of the key thoughts that you'd like me to share? And everybody universally said the importance of harmonization. And we've heard that today too, and yesterday. So many opportunities for and discussion about the benefits of reliance and harmonization. And here, I wanted to share a few thoughts on that and those benefits, especially in follow-up to the other perspectives and discussion points today, really of key documents to help us get there. So, as my former panelists have talked about, post-market surveillance is really important and essential to ensuring that medical devices stay on the market, get on the market, serve patients, and that we continue to monitor them to make sure they're acting as they were intended to perform, that we're taking action as needed, and that improvements are undertaken really in service of patients. Resources are few and far between, especially on the device side. I've seen it firsthand with regulators. There is so much to do. There are so many variations in the types of devices that any opportunity to streamline, to harmonize, to be able to use those precious resources to their most impactful is really important. And we can do that in ways that don't limit our ability to ensure safety and efficacy for patients. So it's really important to use those documents like the IMGRF guidance documents and other harmonization documents to get us to where we need to be. And so my fellow panelists have talked today a little bit about using that harmonized coding system. I'm going to share a little bit about the benefits from industry's perspective. So some of the concerns that I've heard from when I sort of went through and asked different perspectives, here's some of the feedback I got. The post-market surveillance and adverse event reporting requirements are varied and differ across jurisdictions. And there are a number of challenges that come with that. The variations challenge our ability to collate and compare and track data across the world. Many industry colleagues are, if they're not today, they're intending to go to multiple jurisdictions to be able to service patients globally. And in order to track that data, to collate, having a harmonized approach to our coding systems, to our detection abilities and reporting requirements is really critical to ensure that we're the ability to track and to be able to provide that feedback back to our patients and to our regulatory organizations. And lack of convergence also makes it difficult to study global data and to do prediction analysis, which is really important as we want to detect and study going forward. And this all obviously helps us to prevent patient harm and to promote public health. So we've already heard a little bit more. We've heard some about the details of this IMGRF document on the harmonized terminology of adverse events. I wanted to talk just a little bit briefly about why harmonization matters for these kinds of products and what might be possible if we have these. Having this coding system that is harmonized allows us to improve signal detection, to innovate and use novel approaches to management systems, and ultimately to be able to respond faster, both for industry, but also for regulatory authorities. And those are really important when we're talking about those critical resources. You also will get better data and better compliance. And using those defined terms and codes to describe these problems encountered, we'll be able to analyze the data better, improves the accuracy of capturing the data, reduces the ambiguity in really understanding what the causes are, which then ultimately increases the effectiveness of the evaluation process. And really, we're focused on both sides in promoting public health and the patients. And that's really critical in better understanding and getting quickly to root cause of potential issues and also notification. And readily usable code, in contrast to sort of narrative text, allows us to look to more sophisticated approaches for that signal detection and trending analysis, which again leads to fast response and is critical for both the industry and the regulatory side. So here are some just thoughts for consideration about why there are benefits not only for broad stakeholders, that for manufacturers, it provides consistency in reporting across the globe, as we mentioned. For regulatory authorities, we said it, my fellow panelists as well as myself, and really supports the analysis of safety and quality and performance information that can readily be used and quickly, which in these circumstances is really important. You want to be able to act nimbly and with agility, and also to be able to provide feedback quickly. It also increases that accuracy of the information. And we talked a lot about yesterday and today, the ability to rely on different regulatory systems and to collaborate. We saw this during the pandemic response, how important that collaboration was. And having this, this terminology that is aligned will really help us to be able to do that more efficiently and effectively. And obviously, we need to get information to patients as quickly as possible, and that enables faster local and international response if needed. And finally, the healthcare providers, that enhances the accuracy, the reliability, and the utility of reports, especially when they're collating large data sets. They can analyze that and pool data. And if you have systems that are maybe globally in nature across regions, this could be really impactful and helpful. So, opportunities for the future. I talked a little bit about what we learned from the pandemic. From the response to the pandemic, we saw really opportunities where global regulators were working collaboratively, having close discussions, both amongst themselves, but with industry directly, working agilely and nimbly to be able in service of patients. I think we can try to learn from that. Obviously, during pandemic times, some of the regulatory opportunities to do that were different because we were in emergency authorization modes, but we learned a lot about the impact of really collaborating and sharing information. And I think we need to take that forward, because it's only what we can do to do our jobs better, to allocate resources effectively, and to really protect patients. And so making sure that we keep that open line of communication. I mean, forums like this themselves help to build that trust. We heard that today and this morning between earlier in this session about how important it is to build trust amongst regulators. And the more that we interact, the more we understand the different systems, the more we work to harmonize, that builds trust. And that's where we can really act in service of patients globally. We also, the opportunities to rely on that analysis globally. One of the pieces of feedback I received from other industry members was sometimes not only is it a burden to provide different information globally, and the burden in terms of the system, not necessarily on the requirements, but then each individual regulator is doing their own individual analysis on that data, and the burden to that system too. Is there an opportunity to think about how do we use summary analytics, rely on different analyses, talk more amongst regulators, so that not multiple regulators are having to reanalyze different data and different types of submissions going, but we really can get to look at the information across the globe amongst regulators to build in efficiencies there. And then finally, you know, the opportunities are endless when we think about, you know, having harmonized systems and coding definitions and terminology for what might be possible in the future, and really looking to more innovative systems that can take that data, predictive analysis, and really, you know, help both regulators, governments, and industry to help protect patients, this is what it's all about. So those are some thoughts from the industry's perspective, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to share those thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicole, and also for sharing directly your experience and your thoughts. I think this is very helpful. And actually, we're now going to move to the Q&A session with all the panel members. And we currently have 3 questions in the chat, but perhaps before we go into this question, I wanted to jump on these last comments that Nicole has made, and maybe use that opportunity to ask the participants, what are your views in terms of how to facilitate information sharing and reliance at the global level between the regulators? I know that we had just before a session that was also on reliance, but I think it was not really specific to post-market surveillance and market surveillance. So I think it may be good also to have your thoughts on this. And maybe for that one, I would invite maybe first our colleague from Indonesia, Dini, if you would like to share your thoughts, and maybe we could also hear from Anita. So over to you, Dini. Dini, I think you're on mute. If you're
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. We discussed about this question in the chat box here.
No, so the first question was just from your perspective, how could we facilitate information sharing between the regulators and at the global level, and thus how can we facilitate reliance?
Okay, thank you, Adrian. Yeah, well, in Indonesia, actually, I'm talking about the regulation in Indonesia. So we have a forum that to collaborate with the industry to facilitate any issue, or is there any update in implementing post-market surveillance. We have a facilitation forum. We have a forum with the industry, manufacturers, and also the healthcare institution. So we commonly we have a meeting to facilitate all of this, and of course, to the reliance for medical device, we always collaboration with WHO, of course, and we have forum with health working group. So I think that's enough to facilitate the what industry needs and needs to speak to us, and any ideas or any suggestion for us. We are open-minded to always developing our regulation to meet their needs too. Of course, to compromise with them if any other issue happen in Indonesia. So I think it's the same with other regulatory here too. So of course the collaboration is very neat, but this is challenges for us too, when how we are connecting with the industry and users or client or patient, and we as regulator is between industry and users too. So we sometimes have a complaint or feedback from the users, and we are providing feedback too to the manufacturer. But challenge for us is not every industry of especially local industry that already aware about this post-market surveillance. So sometimes they just don't seems to understand that why should they report to us? Why should they report to us if there's anything happen to the medical device? So building this awareness not just for the users or clients, but also for the industry and manufacturers too. So that's maybe that's might be our homework together, right? Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you very much. So some challenges as well in terms of how to communicate with maybe all the regulators, the manufacturers, and also in general the reporters. And I note also your last point on the need for awareness and maybe more capacity building towards the industry, and maybe especially on the local industry in general, on how to ensure their responsibilities when it comes to post-market surveillance. Anita, over to you. If you would like also to address the question on information sharing and reliance.
Yeah, just quickly, I would like to talk a little bit about the fact that I think it's really important for regulators to share information, but it's often difficult to know what information to share. We have a lot of data that comes in, we have a lot of incidents, and it might not be that each and every incident is of interest to other regulators. I actually think maybe the best place to start would be to make sure that field safety notices are shared, and there can be a fairly hands-off approach to sharing, where if you have a repository on your website, and that means that other regulators can clearly see what field safety notices are current for products in your jurisdiction, or you could even, if you have an incident reported, you see a field safety notice and you see the other affected countries, you could even forward on to those countries. And WHO, we have a list of all the focal points. So if you don't know the name of those people, you don't know their contact address, you can always send, in fact, to me, and we can make sure that the other regulators get it. So I think once you've got that field safety notice and you know what action needs to be taken by users, let's say they need a software upgrade, they need to update the labeling, there's some different components that they should be using, that's the information I think is what's the priority really to be shared, because that's what's having the impact at the patient level. And how we might share incidents, I think, is perhaps a second conversation. And on reliance, sometimes people think about reliance more as market authorization. Can I rely on the authorization that another regulator has? I think you can also use it for reviewing investigation reports. So I have to say, as WHO, I often get the EU investigation report. They literally just give me the same PDF. And I look at the national competent authority that's reviewed that, and I say, well, you know what? This national competent authorities reviewed this investigation report, and they are happy with this final report, and they're happy with the probable root cause and whether there's a field safety corrective action or not, then I can probably rely on this. I know that regulatory authority is an IMDRF member, for example. I probably would be able to rely on that in some way. Reliance is very different to recognition. Recognition meaning you just accept it without even thinking. Reliance is still, you look at the work that another regulator's done and you think, okay, will this actually address the needs of my population and our risks? Something like a malaria test, maybe, we have different conditions. We might have HRP2 deletion or something like this. But in reality, we're all very, very busy people. We're getting thousands of incident reports as a regulator a year. I can't even imagine in Indonesia how many incident reports you might get. I know that Australia, that has a population of 26 million, they get 9,000 incident reports a year, and they have 20 people working on that. So
Indonesia, magnitude, population bigger. So I think that relying on other regulators' review of incident reports is a really great way to use reliance for post-market surveillance. Over.
Thank you very much, Anita. And so to do this, as you highlighted, maybe we would need to further give thoughts in terms of how to easily access the information that is required for reliance. Then, so I'll move now to the questions that we have received in the Q&A box. And
Adrian, maybe I'd like to add on.
Yes, please.
Yes. So I'd like to add that essentially we do have information sharing mechanisms in place. So for example, for the NCAR, the National Competent Authority Exchange Program. So currently, this is just limited to the IMDRF MC members, but that is already one channel that's available. And informally, I think within ASEAN, if there are any adverse events or any signals that are of concern, we do informally share it with our ASEAN members. So as for, I think Nicole mentioned about giving this picture that, individual regulators doing their own trending analysis, in their own silos. It's not entirely true. There are mechanisms in place to share information, one, but at the same time, I would like to highlight that it's actually important that each individual regulators do their own trending analysis, because they are signals and trends that are pertinent to certain geographical locations. Like within Singapore, for example, there may be certain issues that crop up, and it may not be very relevant to maybe the US or Indonesia and stuff like that. So actually, it is an important component of doing trending analysis within our own regulatory authority, within our own local jurisdiction. So yeah, back to Adrian.
Yeah, can I respond to that? I really appreciate you saying that, because the piece of feedback that I got and that I spoke about was really about global trending requirements, so reporting on other jurisdictions and then having to reanalyze that data rather than summary data. So I absolutely agree with you. That those are your citizens. You need to be able to track. But if there are opportunities for, as many jurisdictions now have reporting requirements from post-market work in other jurisdictions, which is fine, but can we utilize other summary data or other analysis? So thanks for that clarification.
All right. So now I would propose that we move to the participants' question. And so there are two questions first from one of the participants. I think we could probably group them together. And I understand that probably they're underpinned by some questions related to legal responsibilities for the manufacturer and also probably for the regulator. I understand that the participant is probably from one regulatory authority. So two questions taken together. The first one is related to how can we as regulator, I understand it, how can regulator rely on the manufacturer or the authorized representative to report any incident to the authority? And beyond that, how can the regulator ensure that they did carry out then post-market surveillance responsibilities to report all incidents that came to their knowledge and have taken appropriate action? And another question that I understand is also directly related to that. So it is mentioned that also usually manufacturer, even if they report, they tend to often conclude that the root cause cannot be determined and no corrective action or preventive action or FSCA is required for this particular device. So what sort of action have the regulator to take? And how can they approach this situation? So I understand it's really related to the legal responsibility and the difficulty for one regulator in one country to enforce their responsibility when it is considered that the whole manufacturing chain and supply chain is very much global, and there may even not always be a legal representative in the country. So perhaps first I would like to ask maybe Dini if you would like to share your experience in Indonesia with respect to that. And maybe Leylin, you would also like to share your views on this particular question. So Dini, over to you.
Okay. So if we have received any of those investigation report, well, normally we will need more information from the manufacturer. So normally we can invite the manufacturers to explain to us clearly. So why the conclusion is what is that? So the conclusion is no corrective or preventive action, because we know that if there's any adverse event or incident that happen in medical device, so there must be a root cause. There must be analyzed to why is it happen. So normally we invite the manufacturer to explain to us directly and explain to us why the conclusion is cannot be determined or no corrective or preventive action. And sometimes we ask them to do some FSGA for that particular device. That's a need. Even if there's adverse event or any incident happens, not because the medical device, but because the operator. So we still need the FSGA report or recourse report why that's happened. That's Adrian.
Thank you, Dini. So I think that addresses well the question on what usually regulators can do when the manufacturer concludes that no action is required, but when you look at the information you have, maybe you have a little bit of doubt and you would like to challenge it. And I think it resonates also well with the presentation from Anita. And Leylin, then maybe you could focus on the other questions that was related to how can a regulator rely on the manufacturer or the authorized representative to actually report if anything goes wrong and still consider that they adequately carry out their post-market responsibilities?
Well, in Singapore, it is a mandatory requirement to report adverse events and field safety notices to HSA within prescribed time. So I think we probably, on that end, so far, most of the reports that we have received, and actually our FSCA's field safety notices are actually on our website. They're published there. On the back end, we also do overseas surveillance. So we do check that we do have a team trying to search and scour the website, the internet for field safety notices. And if we see that certain of these field safety notices are not reported to us and the device is registered with us, then of course we will write an email to the company and then pursue further. With regards to, you mentioned about companies always writing, when they're doing the reporting, they're always telling us or giving us the information that, they are not able to, basically saying that they can't find a conclusion, they can't find a root cause. I think all regulators to have a certain threshold for that. So when a certain number is when they're repeatedly having the numbers, the frequency is high, and there is source for concern, then I think probably that would not suffice. We'll definitely go in and probe a bit more and ask the company to justify why are we seeing such frequencies when you're saying that there's no issues with the device. There's some signal starts to some alarm bells start ringing, then we will probe a bit further. So yeah. So on that end, for as you mentioned about companies giving us reports which they can't conclude or can't have final root cause. But of course, it's understandable that there are reports in which really the companies aren't able to do much. Like for instance, the devices discarded. These after you've seen our team have seen few adverse event reports. We basically have a feel of basically what the ground is. So there are instances where really the company is not able to do anything, and just a review of the production records is all they can do. And we would accept that if for certain devices the threshold is not crossed.
Thank you very much, Leilin. So I think maybe one answer I get from your response is that basically using the information from the manufacturer does not mean that you need to completely trust all the manufacturers that are on the market. It's first you need some legal provisions, and you need to ensure that in your country you have the adequate legal provisions that require the manufacturer to report and to share the information also with the regulators. But still, that doesn't mean that you need to blindly trust everything that you receive. We had just one example. So in Singapore, with additional surveillance or intelligence in other countries to cross-check the information. And maybe in addition, you could also use even just the interactions you have with your own manufacturer, and maybe have a risk-based approach to your different manufacturer. If you see that repetitively one particular manufacturer does not report adequately, then probably you would want to strengthen a little bit the oversight for that particular manufacturer compared to the others. And that may also be related somehow to other factor you would want to consider in your approach to market surveillance. Before we move to the next question, I was just wondering, Nicole, if from the industry, because I suppose that's probably a question you may often hear, or you may be also very familiar with, also having worked on both sides. So is there any additional aspects or particular comments you would like to share at this point of the discussion?
I mean, thanks for the opportunity. I agree with my fellow panelists. To have a product on the market, you have the privilege to have that product. You know that there are requirements and you need to follow them. Where it gets difficult sometimes is when there's miscommunication in terminology. For example, what a recall might be in a different jurisdiction might be called something somewhere else. And then someone might say, well, that was considered a recall, but maybe by definition of another regulator, it means something different. And so my biggest advice from both sides is, and what you said, Anita, in your presentation, is go to the manufacturer, ask them. Sometimes they have global viewpoints, share that information. They're required to track, they're required to do these things, and they will be closest to the information. Now, you'll always have good apples and bad apples and people who have opportunities for improvement. But the manufacturer is the onus to come and share that information. And if they are doing the right thing, which we hope everyone is, because really thinking about who's using these products, these are our families, these are our grandparents, these are our communities. So we are all patients ourselves a lot of the times. We owe it to our communities to be able to find if something's wrong. But I do think that there's opportunities for more communication. Where I see it from experience going wrong is if a regulator or even a company makes an assumption based on misinformation, that doesn't serve anyone, right? So so making sure that you go to the manufacturer, ask them if they're seeing the same trending analysis, see what they're, is it correct? Sometimes there's also some difficulty and it takes a little bit of time to understand whether it's a true signal or what does that mean. But that collaboration can be so key, and it also builds trust between the regulator and the manufacturer, so that over time, you can start to understand what that manufacturer is about. And I recognize there's all types, large, small, and all of them have different capabilities, and not all have the same opportunities. So I do recognize that, and I want to mention that, but I think there cannot be anything wrong with making sure there's clarity and communication on both sides.
Thank you very much, Nicole, for these additional remarks. And so jumping also on these questions related to how to identify trends among all the data that is being shared. So we have one particular question that relates to so the terminology and the codes that were developed, and they would like basically to have a practical example or insights from the trending analysis. I think the colleague would like to understand a little bit better how all these data can be used to identify trends and in the end to facilitate the work of regulators. So Dini, maybe you would like first to share with us your experience on how in Indonesia you analyze the data to identify trends.
Okay, I joined to analyze this data. So actually, if any adverse event happens, so what we do firstly is check if this product is registered, and then check the manufacturer. And if there need an investigation, we sometimes we determine if the health facility where the adverse event happened is already use the medical device correctly, and then we determine if the quarantine of the affected product is need to be done, and then we inform the manufacturer what that and the local representatives, of course, what to do next, if they should do the more investigation, or they should needs to release some FSGA or FSNs. So this analyzed data we use to we actually use the analyzed data to review the report for scientific, of course, and then we sometimes follow up with the experts to know, because we know that we are no expert in this particular medical device, so we need to talk with the expert about this analyzed data to make a conclusion, or to know what to do next in this medical device. So this actually when we look like this analyzed data reported. So that's what we do. So sometimes we do analyze data too. We analyze it and we talk to the expert what to do next.
Thank you very much. And just before I give the floor to another participant, there was one question a bit related. Maybe you can quickly address it. And that question was, no, sorry, actually it concerned all the countries. So I'll take it with another one. No, there was one quick question, which was, what is the difference between adverse event and field safety corrective actions report in Indonesia?
Okay, so in Indonesia, adverse event report is basically consists of the information of the medical device, information of the manufacturers, and then how that adverse event happened, and the information of the users or patient, and then a quick investigation when the adverse event happened. So it was like a quick response when the adverse event happened. And the FSCA in Indonesia is more like after the investigation has been done. So FSCA is the action that taken by the manufacturer after investigation. Is that a recall or modification of the medical device, or even suggestion about the use of the medical device, like updating in IFU, information for use, or if the device is no longer in the market, maybe, but still in use, like an implant. So there must be a suggestion from the manufacturer about how the medical device is used. So FHCI is a report after the investigation has been done when adverse event happened.
Thank you very much.
Is that clear? Okay.
It is. So maybe now, Leilin, you would like to share also maybe the experience from Singapore in terms of how the data is analyzed and how you identify trends in Singapore?
Sure. Very simply, I guess, for our database in terms of numbers, when we observe an increased frequency of a particular adverse event for a particular device or particular device category, we may query a bit more. And even for events in which the frequency may not be so high, but the severity is something that's not tolerable, we would also then may again approach the manufacturer. So in a lot of these cases, we work closely with the manufacturer. It's not something that is just on our end, we mandate something immediately. We do give the chance to manufacturers to explain, give their rationale on why certain things are such. So there is that conversation going on before we roll out or require the manufacturer or the local, basically the registrant or the importer in Singapore's context to roll out any field safety corrective actions or any additional field safety action on the ground. And of course, there are also certain, not so much on the using the trending analysis, but also on this, we do, when certain information is obtained from the ground, for example, I think very recently where, hospital do certain testings, etc. And, these feedback from the ground, we will also then pursue and request from the manufacturer certain information. And so all these are, all these signals that we get, we may also, for certain cases where we see some trend, we may not take any action yet, but we may basically ask the users, all the users in Singapore. Singapore is a small country, so we do reach out to the users and ask them, have they encountered a similar issue, especially if we have certain trends that are on the fence. So these are some of the active surveillance that we actually do, that we reach out to the users and then we see whether there really is a true signal before we require the manufacturers to do any additional action.
Thank you very much. Mugant, could you guide me on, I understand we're reaching the end of this session, but do we have additional time for one last question?
Sure, Adrian, we can do one more question.
Okay, very good.
A short one.
So, yeah, so first, Dini, there is one, you have a lot of success. So there is one particular question on the requirement for adverse event in Indonesia. So maybe you can directly answer it in writing in the Q&A box.
Okay.
Maybe then I would like to give the floor to Anita, because maybe you had less chances to participate so far in the panel. So one short but big question. And we can maybe group it together. One first question is, do you foresee a point in the future where post-market surveillance would become more relevant than pre-market approval? And maybe one that is a little bit related, which is on how to promote cooperation between manufacturers and users to answer that they get all the information they need. Short response.
Yes, I had a feeling you'd ask that one. I'm biased, so of course I do see a future where post-market surveillance will, I think, should be taking 70% of the regulatory load and then 30% on post-market, pre-market assessment. At the moment, it's 70-30 the other way. Everybody's trying to use market authorization and pre-market to prevent product getting on the market. We need to be open to new innovations. We need to have access to medical products, and there are trade-offs with that. And by having a good post-market surveillance system where the manufacturers are obligated legally, and if they don't, that you can enforce that they report incidents to you, I actually think that post-market surveillance has the ability to actually be able to collect much more information and to actually prevent more patient harm than even a pre-market assessment can do. The reason why: medical devices change over time, the environment they use change over time, the way they're manufactured changes over time, the quality system under which they're manufactured. So the products are constantly changing anyway. And so what happened in the pre-market versus all of these, I'll say post-listing things that happen, so all of the change requests you have to review. And I think that post-market surveillance also allows you to be part of this global system where if you're exchanging information, you have a global picture. So I do think that it needs to happen. I think we need to make sure that regulators put as much resources and are capacitated to as much resources into post-market as they do to pre-market. I think it also means we need to have a mind shift in industry as well about taking seriously their obligations, and also using the data that they have. They have the best data source, making sure that they work very well with their marketing authorization holders if they are local representatives, making sure you get that information from the local representatives. We know that often it is very difficult, and that was one of the questions, how do we know that we get all the information? You as manufacturers have to really reach out and make sure that you have good legal agreements with your local authorized representatives to get that information, particularly if it's in a language that you don't understand. That's where the IMDRF codes are gold. You don't have to write false negative. You don't have to write review of production records. You don't have to write misdiagnosis. The code will help you to unpack that. So as regulators, making sure that you translate IMDRF codes into your language as a regulator, but knowing that the manufacturers will probably be using English as a fairly global business language. And so that's my pointer there. And about cooperation between manufacturers and users. Again, that's why I, as WHO, present at these kind of fora. I also present at program fora where we're talking with programs. You hear me talk a lot about lab. I talk a lot with testing programs, with laboratories, but also with hospitals and other users. As manufacturers, we need to make sure that you impress to them that this is your obligation. You are required to do this by asking, using customer surveys, technical support calls, maintenance calls, every opportunity to engage with users and say, hey, tell me about the product. Give me your feedback, and not just waiting till there's a complaint. And so starting this dialogue where there's an element of trust, where if that user's saying, actually, I can't really put the lid back on very easily and it's leading to me tipping my drink bottle. Yeah, tell your manufacturer, make sure they know that feedback, because that can, prevent the escalation to something that's a really high risk event. And us as WHO will keep on promoting this need for users and manufacturers to be collaborating, and then manufacturers reporting those incidents that meet certain criteria to the regulator so that they are able to look at those ones that maybe there's more risk or maybe more potential for harm. But really, we think it is so important for users to be empowered and to not fear they're going to get in trouble, to not fear that their boss will get angry at them, the regulator will get angry at them. It's not about that. It's about a cycle of feedback. Good feedback, bad feedback. Think of it as TripAdvisor. You write when you've had a good experience, you write when you've had a bad experience, and trying to sort of keep this open line of communication so that then when there's those reportable incidents, that they can be identified quickly, reported to the regulator, and that loop of making sure that everything that needed to be done for the root cause analysis and the field safety corrective action has been done. Over.
So thank you very much, Anita, for this response, and in general to all the panel members, so also Leiling, Dini, and Nicole for your great insights in the presentation, but also beyond in making a great job in addressing the questions from the participants. And apologies, Mugant, I did not manage very well the time, so over to you now for the concluding remarks.
Not at all, Adrian. Thank you very much, and panelists, for handling that topic very ably and for the useful presentations. As you can tell, we try to incorporate as many different perspectives as we can to have a substantive discussion. And to participants, thank you for your questions. So Stephen, I will hand it over to you now for the closing remarks before I go through some final admin details. Stephen, please.
Thank you, Magant, and good morning to you all. As I participated in our sessions yesterday and today, I was really impressed with not just the quality of the presentations, but the breadth of consensus that we seem to have on the benefits of medical device regulatory convergence and how reliance can serve as a cornerstone of it, if not the cornerstone. I found of particular value the information shared by the WHO, as well as the positive experience reported by Singapore and the Philippines on their reliance initiatives and the importance of sharing the hows with other jurisdictions and how other NRAs may benefit from them. On post-market surveillance, there's probably some work before us on the need for full alignment on a harmonized reporting and coding system and the need to work on strengthening the reporting amongst all stakeholders. We apologize for the technical difficulties experienced by the US FDA. We will work with Mr. Mafnas to record and share his presentation with the participants as well. I extend my deep appreciation to all the speakers, moderators, and participants. I thank the WHO, the NRAs, and industry representatives, all very busy, yet all very knowledgeable. I thank ASEAN and the ASEAN Medical Device Committee, and I wish to thank Mugant, Sandra, Leticia, and team for working to pull this workshop together. And I, of course, thank USAID and ANSI for the opportunity afforded to AdvaMed and our partners to work with them under the Standards Alliance Initiative with this focus on ASEAN and Southeast Asia. It was a pleasure to see it all come together. All of the proceedings will be posted online and shared with you. We encourage you to go back and review any information and to share it with interested parties. We remain available to answer any questions that you may have, to receive any feedback on these sessions, and to collect your suggestions for future events. Until next time, thank you, and I wish you a pleasant week.
Thank you, Stephen. We have now reached the end of our two-day workshop. As I said, it is the MDRC's first engagement with ASEAN and the private sector in the region at such a large scale, and it would not have been a success without your support and active participation. Thank you again to all the speakers. And I'd like to reiterate what Stephen mentioned. For ASEAN member states who are interested, the MDRC project will last through June 2024. If you'd like to engage the team, please feel free to get in touch with Stephen or Sandra or myself. And finally, a reminder about our recordings that are going to be posted on the MDRC website. And you would have seen that Sandra has posted the link in the chat. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.